I'm here with Huseyn Guliyev, who's a second-year business management student from Cartmel, and you're also the faculty rep for the management school. Do you think you've got the experience necessary for the role of education officer?
That's a great question, Josie. Thank you very much. In the past year, since October, when I was elected, I've had the chance to talk with lots of professors, teachers, students, the student union members, get their opinion, their views on the current issues, the most prevalent ones at the university, such as extensions, AI, cost of living crisis, and others. And I believe that in the last, 5 months now, I have indeed gathered not nearly enough experience, but I've gathered sufficient amount of experience to actually make what I want to do next year happen.
Now, in your manifesto, you've got 2 key points. So to start on the first one, you've talked about the use of AI and wanting to have the university extend access to tools like GPT-4 to every student at the university.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good idea?
See, that's something I've had lots of conversations on, because AI is my personal passion as well. All my friends would be able to tell you that. So there are 2 things. There are 2 sides to this. Okay, first one is the fact that lots of students use AI to kind of help them with their education, right? They either don't understand the graph, they understand a concept. For example, me personally, when I was preparing for an exam, I had this graph that my professor drew on his presentation, and I had no idea what this is talking about. So what I did is I put a screenshot in ChatGPT. I asked it what it means in that context, and it gave me a full answer. And that way I understood that concept and then used that knowledge in my exam that was the following day. There is another side to this, of course, that students use AI to actually outsource their learning, their critical thinking skills. So if you go around the library and you will just look at the computer screens that lots of students have there, around 60–70% of the windows are ChatGPT screens. This tells you that, of course, the majority, I am a believer in good faith, of course the majority are using it to help their education, but there is a significant minority that are using it to, let's say, cut corners in their learning. So there are 2 sides to this. However, after talking to so many people, after talking to professors, especially conservative professors on AI, I've come to a realization that even though students might end up misusing AI, if we update our education system, our curriculum in a way that actually requires students to use AI in a collaborative way instead of replacing their thinking, then we can reach a point where even if a student is using AI, it is not interfering with their education. It is not decreasing its quality. It is actually making it much easier for them to access information, much easier for them to learn knowledge, and eventually get higher results, better grades, and better opportunities in their future career.
I mean, generative AI, though it's not capable of producing something new, it takes in massive amounts of data and it regurgitates the parts it thinks are relevant to a massive learning institution like Lancaster University. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't a better way to learn be by going to your lecturers?
Of course, yes. In-person learning is, so far, it cannot be surpassed. But there is another thing, okay? When I talk to people that are usually, or at least initially, against the use of AI, there is this thinking process that AI is just a statistical model. It is a statistical model, and it is trained on a lot of information, and it is trained to produce an answer that is predicted to be most relevant. If you think that way, then yes, AI is useless. It's not going to help you. It can mislead you. It will provide you with false information. But if you stop focusing on the processes of AI and instead switch your focus to performance of AI and ask questions, especially the paid versions, and this is something that I also touch upon in the campaign, as you mentioned before. If you ask, for example, GPT-4, and the more you ask, the more you realize there is a pattern there. There is, I don't know if you call it thinking, I don't know if you call it understanding, but there is something going on there that is helping me become better, learn more about its field. It is a statistical model, yes, but that statistical model helps me understand topics that I couldn't have understood myself, that the lecturer couldn't explain to me.
But As you say, with these sorts of models and AIs, there's the potential for it to spit out incorrect information. I've tried these tools in the past, and I've found on my degree, at best, it's got a cursory understanding of the topics we're talking about. At worst, it will very, very confidently spit out complete falsehoods. It will generate completely made-up sources. That's been a big way in which students have been caught out for using AI, because they cite things which don't exist.
Yeah.
Because when these artificial intelligences produce these answers, they more or less every time do so with incredible confidence.
Yeah.
Is there not a risk that even when students are using it in good faith, they're dangerously misled?
Of course there is a risk. There is a huge risk there. And could I ask, what field are you studying?
PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics.
Yeah, I see. There is a huge risk everywhere. But that's another point that I want to advocate for if I do become the election officer for next year. I want there to be education on AI. I want university to educate students, to educate staff members, and I will give you 2 examples for this. To educate staff members and educate students on how to use it properly, when to trust it, when not to trust it, and then which AI tools to use for what type of tasks. So if you allow me to bring a few examples. So one of them, a few days ago, I received feedback for my coursework assignment. I read the feedback. I got a grade that I did not expect. It was much lower than I expected. I worked hard with my group and I just expected much more. I read through the feedback and I just realized there is something off with this piece of text. I read it again and I'm like, this is suspiciously like something I would get if I asked ChatGPT to write me something. What do? I copy and paste it in the most popular GPT detector, GPT-0, but it's not reliable. I don't like ChatGPT detectors overall because they're very unreliable, but just for the sake of it, I do it and I get 96% probability that AI was used in this piece. And what does that mean? That means that I received a low quality feedback, not necessarily because the person that gives feedback is doing it in bad faith, that doesn't want me to learn better. It's just because they haven't necessarily learned how to use AI in a way that will let them improve their own quality of feedback and make me learn from my work and provide a better quality feedback. So that's an example where staff could be educated on the use of AI. And there is another example. This is not really a student example, but overall. For example, I'm sure you've heard of this. There were cases when lawyers in America, they used ChatGPT to prove their cases. And when the cases were actually reviewed later, they realized that those cases didn't exist. My personal experience, the first time ever using ChatGPT, I asked for sources. I get some made-up sources. I think they're real, and I don't check until the last 2 hours of my essay, and I realize they're all fake. I have to research again. Thank God that it went well. The essay is completed very well, but still. But I learned, and I stopped using it for those kind of things. I started using AI for the things that it's actually good for.
But is your first example not a strong argument about why we should keep AI out of education? Yeah, we could educate all the 20-odd thousand students at Lancaster, the 5,000 staff at Lancaster, about how to use these tools. But it's expensive, it's complicated, and it's fundamentally a new, difficult, and at times a hard to understand technology. Wouldn't it just be easier for the university to go, let's put this to one side, let's keep it out of education?
It would definitely be easier. I didn't really think it would be easier, but it would definitely be something the path of least resistance. But the world doesn't work that way, okay? Companies right now, over 90% of the Fortune 500 companies are using generative AI in one way or another. There is ChatGPT everywhere. As I said before, students in the library use it. Students at their homes use it. I use it. I don't know if you use it, but you've probably used it before. And professional career-wise, whoever I ask, when I ask ChatGPT, they know what I'm talking about. I ask them and they say, yes, I use it, or no, I don't use it because it's not effective enough, but I will use it in the future. There is this huge change, and university resisting this change is not going to make the situation better. Because if I am learning how to write an essay right? I'm not saying we shouldn't write essays, but if I'm learning how to write essays, and in the future, I will never need that skill in my work life, ever. Yes, there are arguments to this. I already see you coming up with some. If I never use that skill, why would I need to learn that in the university? I'm not saying we should stop writing essays, but we should definitely update our curriculum to the modern standards to integrate AI, because AI is here to stay. It is not something that will go away eventually.
But by your own argument, we wouldn't be implementing AI to bring it up to the modern standard. We'd be implementing it to bring it up to a hypothetical future standard under the theory, the dream that maybe it replaces our need for writing, our need for critical thinking. Even if that is the case, is that really what we want out of a university? Just to be taught how to use a robot to do it all for us? What's the point of going to university?
I agree that we should definitely use AI. We should learn how to use it. But the thing is, when you learn how to use AI effectively, if someone is teaching you how to use AI, they will never tell you. You just say, write an essay for me, and it will write an essay. They will never tell you that. They will tell you that you have to work with it in the loop. You'll have to use the AI and yourself, and you have to have the human in the loop in this AI workflow. This is proved by several research papers that have already been done in BCG, for example, Boston Consulting Group, and with Harvard Business School. And these kind of these processes ensure that students are still kept in the process of learning, and people are still working. They're just using AI to improve their productivity, to improve their performance, improve the quality of their work.
Okay, but right, putting aside our arguments about whether or not we should, if you go to the university and say, I would like you to pay so that every student in this university has access to GPT-4, won't their first thought be, aren't we encouraging plagiarism?
Yes, that's their first thought, and that's why I'm here.
But how, in that case, will you persuade the university administration to spend a lot of cash on very expensive AI tools, which, yeah, can be used correctly, sure, but can also be used to cheat?
That's their first thought, though. When I talk to them, after they talk to me, rather, or when we talk, the second thought and the third thought that comes to their mind is, okay, a student is telling us that almost everyone around them is using AI in one way or another. And there is a minority in that group that pays $20 a month or even more and gets access to tools like GPT-4. And with tools like GPT-4, they can do substantially more stuff. They can outsource substantially more of their critical thinking. Now, how do you deal with that? You can't just ban ChatGPT from the university Wi-Fi. There is cellular data after all. What you can do is, as a university, provide access to all students, access to ChatGPT-4. Of course, this is going to be very expensive if you do it the systematic way, get the ChatGPT Enterprise. I've already actually had this conversation with one of the professors. He told me he contacted with the ISS team, and they contacted OpenAI to see if there is an option to integrate ChatGPT in there, to buy the subscription basically for the students. And he told me that, he didn't disclose the number, but he said this is the number that can only be afforded by giants like GM and Ford and McKinsey. So yeah, that's a little off the charts, the pricing there. Just imagine, $20 a month minimum, multiplied by 20,000 students per month. There is another way though. If the university develops an app that is connected to the servers of OpenAI, which can be done already. I've already started this project. Connect to the servers of OpenAI, then let students have access to this app using their student ID, like iLancaster basically, but hopefully better. Yes, connect their student ID there, and they can ask GPT-4 questions. Now, with the paid subscription right now, you get up to 40 responses per 3 hours. There is a limit because there aren't enough servers in the world. What this happens now is university limits it to, for example, 10 or 20 responses per 3 hours, per 2 hours. Students can now, all of them, have free access to GPT-4, even though it's more limited, but they all have access to it, and university, if there is an issue, for example, if there is a concern that a student is using ChatGPT to plagiarize, they can invite the student and then discuss their chat history with the GPT-4. and review where there was plagiarism, whether it was plagiarism, and take the further steps if necessary.
Now, we've spent most of the interview at this point talking about your one specific policy here, because it's one of the more out there and radical among all the student manifestos. But to ask a question about another topic which is important as education officer, a lot of your work involves liaising with academic staff and heads of departments. And there were obviously a lot of strikes last year, and whilst the pension dispute that the union has with British universities has been resolved, the pay and working conditions one hasn't. The strikes have been suspended because there wasn't enough turnout on the last ballot, but there's the potential those strikes come back in the future. If the UCU were to strike again during your term as education officer, would you support the staff union?
See, let me tell you something that happened this year. Okay, so I've worked with the current education officer, the VP of Education right now it's called, in the future it will be called Education Officer. And a great person, like we've collaborated on many events, but I've realized that as a student officer, as a full-time officer, it is very easy to take on too many things to try to tackle in a single year. It's a very busy role if you make it very busy, and it can get too busy to deal with anything and impact it substantially. Mm-hmm. And what I found this year as a faculty rep working directly with the student union is that I sometimes struggle finding time to meet one-on-one with student union full-time officers just because of how busy their schedule is. And this is something I want to change. This is something that you've probably thought about when you're reading my manifesto. I've only focused on two major things, which is ChatGPT and extensions. And I want to keep it that way. I want to make sure that next year, when there is going to be a faculty representative coming to me, or a student, or an academic rep coming to me, asking me a question on just asking for a meeting, I can tell them that, yes, I am available, I will talk to you, instead of just saying, okay, no, I have to go to a meeting, I have to go to that meeting.
Okay, sure, but fundamentally, if a student comes to you because you've got strikes and says, you know, I'm really stressed, I'm struggling to do my work because I've not got lectures, I'm not sure what to do, will you tell that student this sucks and it's the fault of the union for going on strike, or this sucks and it's the fault of the university for not paying the staff enough?
I will tell them that this sucks and here's how you deal with this. And how you deal with this is the following. This is my second policy point, which I think you will want to follow up in the future. Would you like to?
Well, the policy on extensions, yeah, yes. I'm sorry, yeah, we're slightly pressed for time. But in simple terms, though, would you support the UCU if they went back on strike? In principle, just yes or no, would you?
I wouldn't blame anyone for going on strike. Okay? I wouldn't blame anyone for going on strike, and I wouldn't blame or criticize anyone for not going to strike. What I would do is much more solution-oriented. And if a student comes to me and asks me for, I'm stressed and I have pieces of coursework that I can't manage to do, what I tell them is that I'm campaigning for 3 no questions asked extensions. Mm-hmm. What this policy will allow everyone throughout the university to do is from 1 to 3, basically, times a year. They can go to their department, and they don't even have to go. They can just go through their app and they say, I cannot handle this right now. I have to get an extension. And they get an extension with no questions asked. Okay. This is something that is widely argued. However, there's a strong push within the students' union and within the university departments.
Right, I'm afraid we're out of time here, but yeah, thank you very much, Huseyn.
Thank you very much, Jason.
I'm here with Josh Chooyin, who's currently a third-year chemical engineering student and is from Grisdale College. You've also a faculty, well, you were formerly a faculty rep and now you're an academic rep for the engineering department. Could you tell me a bit more about how that experience might make you right for the role of education officer?
Yeah, so firstly, thank you for having me on. So as in my time as an academic rep, I've worked with all sorts of different teaching committees. So in the department, we have a teaching committee that makes modules. That then goes to the faculty rep, where that gets approved. And that means I've sort of seen a whole range of different issues over the years. We've had strikes, we've had the marking and assessment boycott, and those affect different students in really different ways. And sometimes it's really hard from an outside perspective to see how that impacts students differently. And that can lead to fairly blanket policies that don't always help students fairly. You can have a situation where a department that has very few strikes, like engineering, gets full uncapped resits, and yet other departments have students that are really struggling because they've had so many missed lectures, and they get the exact same deal, and that's never really struck me as fair or really transparent.
Now, speaking of transparency, you've talked in your manifesto about wanting to improve communication and transparency between the SU and its students. How precisely would you go about that?
Well, we currently have a really good system called the academic reps, and that means that in every degree scheme, in every year, students should be able to nominate one student to work with the Students' Union in representing them, and that's what I've been doing. But we actually really struggle with rep recruitment and rep retention. Part of that is timing. Often people find a lot of what the Students' Union does for them doesn't really help them, it helps the union. And there's not always very clear communication where the Students' Union are working very hard, and there's lots of people at the Students' Union that work really hard trying to make things better for us. But when you don't know how that's going to help you, it's very easy to become disconnected. And there aren't many clear channels to actually get the problems students have accelerated to the people that can solve them.
So what precisely would you want to do to improve communication?
So I would want to see faculty reps have a bit more power and a bit more control over the meetings they hold. A lot of the agenda is run by the Students' Union, trying to solve big problems in the long term, which is important. But that means that when a student comes to you with a problem, if you can't solve it yourself, you've got to go around trying to find the one person that can help. And when Sam Hedges, the current VP, is busy, which he is, because he works hard, he does a lot, that then means you're kind of on your own. So just last week, I had a group of engineers come to me saying they can't get funding for postgraduate masters because they used to be on a degree scheme called an integrated masters that would have meant they did their masters here. And because they've declined to do that, the government isn't willing to fund their postgrad. And you can go to the Students' Union, there's no one to help. Sam would, but he's very busy, he's working very hard, and there aren't that many people with that much expertise to help you through it. So you get directed to the university, and they're helpful, they have people, they care, they try, but actually it takes so long to try and get to the right person, and at the end of the day, that takes so much time off students. And when they're already struggling so much, when so many students are already so stressed, that's not how that should work.
But in concrete terms, what would you change to make the SU more accessible to its students?
I would want rep retention higher. I would want meetings held in the daytime, not 6 till 8. I would want meetings to finish on time. I'd want them to be shorter. I'd want departments sharing more information about their reps. So many students don't even know who their academic rep is. So in engineering, on the top of the Moodle page, there is a button. If you click on it, my face comes up with my email. If you want to talk to me, you can come to find me. That's totally different in other departments. And different departments have very different policies, and that can mean reps essentially get ignored sometimes. I'd want to see a clearer, more uniform approach across the university.
And you've talked as well about wanting to make sure that every single student has got an academic rep, and you've talked about a problem with academic rep retention. Is there a problem there, meaning that some students go unrepresented?
Yes. So I'm lead rep for the Department of Engineering, the School of Engineering. I'm meant to have 25 reps that I work with. I've only got 17. Now, as turnout goes, that's much better than an election. But that means that a huge chunk of particularly fourth year engineers, if they have a problem, they can come to me directly, they're welcome to. But I don't regularly see every student, and that means a lot of their problems do go unanswered.
Fourth year, is that master's students, or
So that is the
after a placement year, do you mean?
That is fourth year master's students on an integrated master's.
Okay. And how precisely would you want to work to improve academic rep retention and make sure that all of the roles available are filled?
Listening to reps a bit more. As department reps, you fill out a lot of paperwork. As a faculty rep, I know most of that paperwork doesn't get read, or can get lost in the system. And that then means you have reps coming to meetings saying, why am I here, what does this achieve? And sometimes there isn't a very good answer. Sometimes it's long-term problems, like we have the curriculum transformation programme, which is a good scheme. It should help solve long problems like timetabling. Very hard to fix timetabling when you've only got so many hours in the week, so many lecturers, so many rooms. But they're considering things like making term time longer, so you could decompress people's timetables. That's delivering in 2026, I think, for phase 1. And full phase 3, I think, is 3 years after that. So yes, the Students' Union should be talking to students about that. And it's very good that they bring people in, experts from the university, people working on this project. But that then gets pushed up the agenda, and the day-to-day problems that reps are trying to solve gets pushed down the agenda, and then you run out of time.
And a big part of the role as education officer is liaising with academic staff, and there aren't any strikes at the moment. The pensions dispute has been resolved. The pay and working conditions won when members were balloted at the start of this academic year. The turnout wasn't high enough to continue striking.
Yeah.
But because that matter's still unresolved, there's the potential for more strikes in the future. If that happened, would you support the UCU's strikes?
So this is quite a complex issue because the UCU have a variety of different problems. So I fully support what graduate teaching assistants have been complaining about. They've been saying that, you know, they get an equivalent pay time of about 10 minutes for every 1,000-word essay they have to mark. That is totally unfair. But that it's hard to see how you can solve long-standing pay problems when there is so little money going into education generally. And I would struggle to argue for an increase in tuition fees when maintenance funding is so low and so many students are struggling with the cost of living.
So should academic staff, for the most part, just accept their low pay then?
No, not at all, not at all. We need to totally rethink the way we fund education. We need a much fairer deal where students get the support they need, and that then gives the university enough money to fund their staff.
But fundamentally, the only way that staff can put pressure on the universities and the government to increase funding and increase pay for them is to go on strikes. So if more strikes were to happen, would you stand with the UCU?
I support the UCU as a concept. I would want to see what specific issues they're complaining about before. I'm not going to.
Well, the specific issues that they've been complaining about are pay and working conditions. Do you think academic staff, graduate teaching assistants aside, are paid enough, and do you think their working conditions are fair at the moment?
No.
Okay.
Give you a straight answer.
Great. Yeah. Now, on top of that, in your manifesto, we've talked about wanting to end hidden costs for students as part of their education. Could you explain briefly what these hidden costs are and precisely how the SU could help eliminate these costs?
Yeah. So it's different in different departments, but a good example would be film students, where you sign up to do a degree in film. On the website, it's very clear, you pay £9,000 a year. That's meant to cover the cost of tuition. You also have to pay college fees. You're expected to have a laptop and a phone. And then you get here, you have a module where you are making a film, and the department provide you with equipment, and they'll provide you with certain specialist staff like an intimacy coordinator. But actually, if you want to fund, say, a location or any set or any equipment that you don't have from the department, you have to pay for that yourself. And that means that students then are left taking money out of what should be going towards bills, what should be going towards food, to fund their degree, when they're already paying £9,000 a year.
And where you've got hidden expenses like that, would you be advocating that the SU foots the bill, or should the SU be putting pressure on the university to foot the bill for it?
So I think that when you pay £9,000 a year for your degree, that should cover the cost of your degree. I think the university should be covering those sorts of hidden costs.
I mean, unfortunately though, £9,000 a year, it doesn't cover the cost. International students' fees are about
True.
£27,000 to £30,000 a year, and that's about what it costs to educate a person per year. And universities have been complaining for a long time that they don't see enough funding off the government. If the government is relying on students to pay tuition fees, then universities will say either tuition fees need to be higher or the funding they get off the government needs to improve. Where can the university find the money to give additional financial support to students on projects like this?
So you're right, I agree with you. You can't just magic up the money. And I don't think there's an easy answer here. I think tuition fees haven't moved in a very long time, and maybe we should look at increasing those. But on the other side of that...
You consider supporting an increase in tuition fees?
Well, I don't like the way we currently structure the debt. So if you have a student loan that covers the tuition fee, the actual headline number doesn't bother me. What bothers me a lot more is the way we've restructured how you pay back debt. So for English students, there's been a recent change from what's called a Plan 2 loan to a Plan 5 loan. That means you'll pay back a heck of a lot more. The actual amount of debt you have isn't, to me, that important. I'm not a financial advisor. But I'm a Welsh student. I get Welsh student finance. So I get £9,000 a year towards my tuition fees. I get £12,000 a year towards my maintenance finance, which is much fairer, much nicer. And that means that I can work on my degree. English students get a much harsher deal. But the total debt for me is much higher. I'll be graduating after 4 years with about 80 grand of debt, but I pay back based on the Plan 2 repayment loan. And the Plan 2 repayment scheme means I'll pay back 9% of what I earn over 27,000. And that's the number where the real cost comes in.
It's effectively a 9% graduate tax, because on the Plan 2 scheme, most students won't pay off that debt before it's erased 30 years after they leave. But with the Plan 5 scheme,
you pay back a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, is applying for students who started in this academic year. It's 40 years before the debt's erased and repayment starts at a lower threshold, I believe,
And that strikes me as a heck of a lot less fair.
But to come back to the specific issue of hidden costs with the funding model we've got at the moment, how would you, if you were elected education officer, push for the SU or the university to fund students' hidden fees?
So I think within departments that hide fees, they're relatively low. So what for a film student is a lot of money, if you're doing a project, say you're expected to contribute perhaps 30, perhaps £40 to that film project, that's coming straight out of your food bill. But on a department level, that's actually not that much money.
A department's got several hundred students. Though £300 or £400 across 200 students, it adds up pretty quickly.
It does add up, but the department should consider that when they're offering these subjects. You shouldn't say, okay, we're going to charge you £9,000 a year, and then actually, if we can't balance the books, we're going to charge you more, and we're not going to tell you. You should be transparent about that. Even if you can't eliminate those hidden costs, which I would like to see, but if that wasn't possible, you should at least be open about this. You shouldn't be hiding it.
You push to make them more open than hidden costs, then if they can't be eliminated. Okay.
If they can't be eliminated, but I would look to eliminate them.
And quickly, is there anything else you'd like to say before the end of the interview?
Please vote, actually. Turnout in SU elections is really low, and I think last year it was about 15%. We're not a very strong democracy if the majority of the students don't know who we are and don't vote for us.
Thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you.
I'm here with Tom Cross, who's a third-year History and Politics student from Lonsdale. Now, Tom, your background is as LGBTQ+ officer, so why have you decided to run for education?
Well, I've been the LGBTQ+ LCO for the year, but I've also been an academic rep, amongst other things. And having represented students, having seen the problems with my own course, and just learn more widely about education at Lancaster, which I find really interesting, I just think I've got a lot of policies that would really help students and the experience to carry them out.
And you've brought your experience as LGBTQ+ officer into your manifesto, talking about wanting to have a focus on equality, diversity and inclusion. Could you explain a little bit more about what you have in mind there?
Yeah, absolutely. So with recent events, it's become clear that Lancaster University does not always support minority students, particularly trans students, but there have been problems before around ethnic minorities, and I think that very heavily overlaps with education. And while the SU can't directly do an enormous amount on that, we can absolutely campaign, we can organise, we can work with other student unions across the country to promote that. And as you said, with my experience with running a trans rights protest in Alexandra Square and the Inclusion Pledge, where we had over a dozen societies sign up to be more inclusive, I think I've got the right experience to do that here.
And have you got any specific policies in mind which you want to implement as education officer in the name of equality, diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, well, for a start, obviously the campaigns I've talked about, but also I'd like to get international students more involved with the student union, because historically it can be quite a tight-knit community. So I want to try and expand that. And one way we can do that is by introducing international student reps, because they have such a unique experience at Lancaster and in education in general. It would be brilliant to get their voices inside and hopefully reach out to their community to get them more involved.
And to look at a different aspect of inclusion, which you've talked about as well, you want to expand the availability of ILSPs. Could you talk a little bit more about what ILSPs are and what the current problems are with the system, in your opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't, I'm not on one myself, but I've been told that at the moment they don't support students in the sense that they give you what they think you need and then leave it at that. So ILSP's integrated learning support is basically the idea is to help disabled students make their education easier, combat shortcomings, that sort of thing. But the problem is they think it's a silver bullet that can just get rid of anything, regardless of whether you're neurodivergent, it's a physical disability. And there's not enough talk between the university and students about what they individually need. It shouldn't be them telling you what you need. It should be a two-way conversation. And I would heavily push the university to actually interact with students and ask what they need, because in my opinion, it's not done enough.
And you've talked as well about wanting to look at the university's policy on issuing extensions. There have been plans which are sort of in motion at the moment to try and offer 3 no questions asked extensions every year. Is that something you'd support? What would you be looking to do with extensions?
Absolutely. So, yeah, 2 things we need to do. One, we need to be giving students extensions when they ask for it. We shouldn't be asking them personal questions about their health or their personal life, because that can be incredibly stressful for a lot of people. And also, there should be some good faith. We're coming here paying £9,000 for an education that they should assume we want, and they shouldn't assume that it's a case of us trying to get out of studies or, to spend less time on work. So firstly, they need to do that, and so I completely agree with the 3 extensions, no questions asked. But I also think it needs to be simpler. Every department has a different procedure for giving extensions, and it should be uniform. It should either be a simple email to your department or a film to fill in, and then that makes it easier and more accessible for students.
You've talked as well about wanting to offer better representation for postgraduate students. What precisely have you got in mind there?
Yeah, so I would, if elected, I would work closely with the postgraduate LCO, because I think we need to make sure they're always included. Among the student officers, it's often a section of the population that isn't represented much. I don't think this year we've had any postgraduates, I could be wrong though, as FTOs. And among reps, obviously it's a smaller proportion of them compared to undergrads. So I would want to look at if we could rebalance that with the rep system, but I'd want to consult with reps and the postgraduates and reps and the LCO first on that, but also the same with minority students. I want to run campaigns, possibly speaking to NUS about that, about graduates more generally in the country, because their deal is so terrible. They're given nowhere near enough support. And while at Lancaster, I can't pretend that I'm going to fix all of that, I can at least play a part in a bigger national conversation about that and push the government to change their policy.
Part of the role as education officer is liaising with academic staff, and there's always the balance there of when the topics of strikes comes up, because it's disruptive to students' education, but at the same time the staff are striking for what they think is right. And you've also got postgraduate students who are often employed as graduate teaching assistants, meaning that they are at once represented by LUSU as students, but also by the UCU as academic staff. Now, there aren't strikes at the moment. The dispute over pensions has been resolved. The one over pay and working conditions. Members were balloted at the start of this academic year, and although they voted in favour, turnout was too low to continue striking. But because that dispute's been resolved, it seems likely that it will come back in the future. If you were elected and there were to be strikes during your time as education officer, would you be supportive of them?
So, take the strikes of last year. I personally supported them. I can't promise I support whatever they do next year because I don't know what the specific issues they'll be striking on, but I think it's a fair assumption that I would, based off my own political opinions, how I think lecturers and postgraduate students should be treated. But it's important to remember that at the end of the day, it's Union Assembly, and rightly so, that decides the student union position on strikes. However, if I was there, I would likely argue heavily in for it. But beyond that, I want to make sure the student union has an action plan for strikes, because we don't. And I think that's utterly bizarre, given that you have an average of 1 or 2 strikes every year. We should have an action plan, an easy spreadsheet where we can go, we've done this, this, this. So importantly, I'd want to reach out for students, tell them what's happening, because it can be incredibly anxiety-inducing if you don't know what's going to happen with your education. I would make sure that we've got warm study spaces open on campus so students aren't stuck at home, maybe at times when they can't heat their own homes, and can be in a safe, warm place on campus. And I would also make sure it's all well publicised so they know what's happening, what we're doing for them, and if they want to support the strikes, they can in a safe and professional way.
But regardless of the Union Assembly's opinion on strikes, you'd be a fairly direct point of contact between academic staff and the university and the students' union. So your opinion on strikes and the way in which you'd take that opinion into meetings can be quite important. So how would you want specifically to handle advocating for students' rights when it comes to issues such as this, where there can be a sort of tension?
Yeah, I mean, so it depends obviously on severity, but given, if you take the marking and assessment boycott last year, I believe every single student bar one graduated on time, and the one that didn't was given their mark very quickly. So I am very confident in Lancaster's ability to mitigate the problems we have, and the student union to support students with welfare during that period. So I would, obviously you want to make sure there's a balance, but I think we shouldn't be too concerned about it ruining a whole student's education, because at the end of the day, it may be 1 or 2 months out of 3 years. You know, I went through strikes, I wasn't affected too badly, and even when I was, the resources were there, and the student was there to support. In those meetings, I'd make it clear that the resources should say be on Moodle, so even if lecturers aren't teaching, they should ideally make sure that there are things on there so that students can keep up their learning, even if it's not being directly taught.
You've talked as well in your manifesto about wanting to get back Wednesday afternoons, which are for the most part set aside for extracurricular activities and student activities with like sports and societies and that sort of thing, but it's not always the case. What specifically is the problem there in your opinion, and what would you be looking at doing to fix it?
Yeah, so it's the university's own policy that every undergraduate student should get Wednesday afternoon, so after 1 p.m, off for sport. I would, for a start, would like to edit that policy. It needs to include postgraduates because they need to be valued as much as any other student, and it should extend to normal societies because, you know, at the end of the day, I'll be honest, I don't play a lot of sport, but I enjoy societies on a Wednesday afternoon. It's brought so much happiness to me at university. I wouldn't have as big a social life if it weren't for them. And even beyond societies, if you just want to sit at home and eat pasta in bed while watching Taskmaster, you should be able to do that if that brings you joy and it makes you healthier with your, if it improves your mental health and therefore improves your work, you should be able to do that. So I would continue what the current VP Education is doing, push the university, go, look, this is your own policy, implement it, poll students if they've been doing, say, you know, you'll tell us you haven't got your Wednesday afternoons off because the university often assumes you do. And also make sure to bring that into the curriculum transformation project, the big project that's changing education at Lancaster, because that will affect timetabling, and go, look, this needs to be earmarked for students. It's student time, it's common sense, it's going to be better for you, and it's better for us.
Is there anything else which you'd like to say before the end of the interview?
Well, thank you for having me. No, I think I've made it clear, but yeah, follow my Instagram, see my longer manifesto in the bio, and cross my box, vote Tom Cross for Education Officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom.